Well, we've come out on a beautiful November morning to explore the history and landscape of Sherwood Forest, the famous medieval forest. We've parked just outside Botham, where the B Road runs east to west and where there's a public bridleway crossing it north to south. Not everybody realises that a bridleway is a very historic right of way. I could come along here on my horse if I wanted to. But today we're just on foot and we're going to see where this track takes us into the history of Sherwood. Well, we're heading down this bridleway through the historic Sherwood Forest. And you might say, well, where's the forest gone? There's a few trees in the background, but you're standing in the fields. Well, the Sherwood Forest was a huge area, and over the centuries it's changed enormously. Fields have been cleared from the old trees, a process called assarting, and as you can see here, we're in some pretty standard enclosure landscapes. But there's still few areas of actual forest left. But the forest wasn't just tree, it was hunting ground, ground for grazing pigs, a whole mixed economy, in fact. But what we're really interested in is this particular route, because this is not, as they say in the advert, just any old bridleway. This is a very ancient trackway. A clue to how old it is the fact that parish boundaries, in fact the district council boundary, runs along this track, which is an indication that it was here before the Normans came, organised the parish system and actually made Sherwood into the royal hunting forest that transformed it in medieval times. Why was this here as a track? Well, because running north to south through Sherwood, you're travelling over sandstone. It's a dry rock, good for walking most of the year, and a much better route in wintertime, particularly from the south to the north. So this became known as the King's Road. It was an important way of getting from the south to Nottingham and then to Doncaster and the north. You might say, well, where's the traffic gone? Well, the modern road is just a few hundred yards away from here on a slightly different alignment, and that's good for us. So we can imagine kings coming this way. King John came along here to his palace, his hunting palace at Clipstone, and many other kings have travelled this route as well. But we're going to follow this route down into the trees to a place of particular significance in the history of Sherwood Forest. No sooner had I said that this was the dry route across the sandstone from south to north than we came round a corner and found a massive flood. So you can all laugh at me for making a mistake like that. Hopefully it's better as we head on into the trees. Well, we've come down the pretty muddy trackway, the King's Road, and now we've reached the edge of the woods called on the map Cunjer Alder Woods. And we're just going to cross this little bridge, and then that will take us to the main river where the Mourne and the Meaden meet. And that's this historic place in the middle of Sherwood we're going to investigate. Well, I'm now standing on what's called Cunjer Alder Bridge. It's a bridge that crosses over the combined rivers of the Meaden and the Mourne, which have joined together just up there. The name Cunjer Alders is a very strange name. Obviously it's partly named after some trees. Cunjer probably comes from Coningsworth, because Coningsworth was the King's Ford. And just up from here, a few yards into those bushes, is where the King's Road running north to south through Sherwood crossed over these rivers. And you might say, well, it doesn't look like you could ford that. Well, the river now is much deeper, and in a few minutes we'll look at some of the sluices that have been built to change the nature of the river. But effectively here is where for well over 1,000 years, perhaps 2,000 years or more, people trekking across Sherwood have crossed over these watercourses. Now, the history of Sherwood is quite complex. Really, what created the forest that we all have in our imaginations were the early Norman kings who turned it into one of their premier hunting grounds. And a hunting forest had many, many different rules to preserve the game and all that was in it in the king's interest. And so the royal forest really became associated with repressive government, particularly under Henry II and King John, who hugely expanded the forest and introduced lots of punitive laws which really penalised people, often for fairly harmless activities. Why this particular place is so important in the forest, though, is actually connected to the reforms of the forest that were begun by King Henry III. Henry reduced the size of the forest and in the 1200s introduced what's called the Forest Charter, the Charter of the Forest, a document almost as important in history as Magna Carta, because it set out much clearer rules for the forest, how hunting and royal sport could work alongside ordinary people who also use the forest. So it's a pivotal moment in English law. And Henry introduced a system for managing the law of the forest. And to do that, he needed to split the forest into sections. And this was the key point in that process. So over 800 years ago, people would meet here and they would draw up the boundaries of the 4 sections of the forest, starting from this point. Now, actually, that links into the fact that this is the parish boundary point and the district boundary point and the constituency boundary point to this very day. One side is Newark and Sherwood, the other side is Bassetlaw. So they would meet here and walk from this point along the boundaries of each of the sections to check the process. And we have one of the early documents that they wrote describing how they would do it. And it starts, for example, the aforesaid walk beginneth at the Forth Elias Ford of Coningsworth by the highway that goes towards Wellow, unto the town of Wellow towards Nottingham, so that the close of the town of Wellow is not of the forest. In other words, one group would start here and they would walk to Wellow, and that was the end of the forest. If you lived in Wellow, you were outside. Others would walk in that direction, to the west, to the south and to the north. And you can still see those reflected in parish boundaries today. So it's a very historic point in Sherwood. And actually, with the law of the Forest Charter, quite a historic point in English constitutional development. At Coningsworth, we've got rivers joining together, the Morn, the Meaden, the Whitewater sometimes called, and they join together for a short period of time. And then we come to this place where they split again. And we have this strange pattern of the Morn and the Meaden running parallel to each other for several miles down towards the point where they become the River Idle. As you can see, there's an artificial sluice at this point which is being created, or a weir that's being created to separate the waters. So you have one river off to the north and one river to the south. Well, we're now standing at a point where quite a lot of engineering has taken place. Down to my left is the original watercourse, and here you can see there's a weir, and the weir is intended to hold the water level at a certain point in a different river system. So running behind me is the new watercourse that takes the water at a higher level down the valley for irrigation, and the weir just balances the water going into the two. There's also here a sluice, which is like a gate which can be opened to let additional water out at times perhaps when the water level is too high. We've walked a few hundred yards from the weir, and we've walked alongside the irrigation channel which runs from the weir, slightly higher level than the river, in order to distribute water to fields further down the valley. Quite overgrown at the moment. On the other side of us though is quite an extraordinary wetland area, admittedly wetter than normal today, and this used to be called Gosling Carr. So that's a name suggesting that in years gone by, this was a place where geese came to breed. Quite an interesting and unusual wetland zone for this part of Nottinghamshire. I'm going to have to be honest with you now, because our original plan was to walk from here down to a famous place known as Robin Hood's Cave. But having set off from Coningswharf along the King's Road, as it crosses through Gosling Carr, we've hit a bit of a problem in that it's completely flooded. So maybe that explains why the modern road runs a little further over to the west. So we're going to have to cheat and go back in our car. But it's worth coming here because this is just a fantastic place. It is so beautiful in the sunlight on a winter's day or a sunny day when there's more leaves. Just a gorgeous place, and a place where lots of things happened, of course. But also 5 parish boundaries meet in this place, and as I can't remember them all, I've had to write them down. So we've got Pearlthorpe, Ollerton, Bourton, Horton and Bothamsall parishes all meet within a few yards of this place, including a very strange little tongue of land that was part of Ollerton parish that used to be called New England on old maps. So it'll be back to the car for us. We've had to cheat a little bit because the original plan was to go to Coningswharf, do our filming there, and then walk on through Gosling Carr to Robin Hood's Cave near Walesby. Unfortunately, as you saw, it was totally flooded. So we've had to get in our car and come round to approach Robin Hood's Cave from the south side. But actually, we're once again picking up the King's Way. This is the very same track that we began on earlier, and it's got exactly the same characteristic. It's the boundary. This is one parish and district, this is another parish and district. If we carried further on down towards the south, the track goes to Wellow and then to Nottingham. This is exactly one of the routes that they followed the perambulations of the forest on when they started from Coningsworth and walked out to Wellow, as I described in the document earlier. Well, because we're on our way to Robin Hood's Cave, and just a few things here we can see. Perhaps a little pocket of what Sherwood might have been like in the Middle Ages. People imagine it was dense trees, but of course you couldn't have gone hunting in a dense forest. What we've got here is a mixture of oak trees and some silver birch, and plenty of room to go hunting in between them, in fact, if you wanted to. Birch are particularly common in Sherwood, and they gave their name to an area of the forest called the Birklands. We'll carry on now and we'll head off to see what we can find that's left of Robin Hood's Cave. I've just come down off the King's Road, which is a few yards above me there, and as you can see, I'm standing on an outcrop of sandstone. This is the area known locally as Robin Hood's Cave, and the reason Sherwood Forest is here is because of this band of sandstone. Very poor for farming, and therefore it had become forest. Now it actually extends all the way from Nottingham up to Mansfield, Worksop and Retford, and it's of course a very, very soft rock, and you can see here the river has cut into the rock. For the same reason, people have used it for housing and cellars. In Nottingham, of course, you can go to the pub or the old trip to Jerusalem and go down into the cellars carved out of sandstone. Mansfield had houses carved out of sandstone, and at Bollum, just outside Retford, the same thing happened. But of course it's not very strong and easily worn away. Here, by the river, we're just a few hundred yards upstream of Coningswharf, where we were talking about medieval Sherwood, and we're on the River Mourne here, which actually at this point changes its name to the Whitewater, just for the section between here and Coningswharf. And so we'll have a look, see if we can get a bit closer to Robin Hood's Cave, and perhaps he's at home and he'll offer us a cup of tea, who knows. Good. Well, I'm not quite sure about the health and safety here, but I've come as close to Robin Hood's front door as I feel like comfortable in doing. What I'm pretty convinced is he's not at home, and I can't see Friar Tuck or Little John or anyone else while I'm here. There doesn't seem much chance that he's going to give me a cup of tea. You might say, well, does this even deserve to be called a cave, and how could Robin Hood possibly have lived there? Of course, this has been here for thousands of years, and gradually over that time the river has eaten into the sandstone and worn it away. So maybe at one time there was a more substantial cave here where somebody might possibly have lived in, called Robin Hood. Who knows? If you've enjoyed our video today, please remember to give us a like or subscribe to the Pilgrims and Prophets channel. Pilgrims and Prophets is a local community history group. We do all sorts of things in Nottinghamshire and Lincolnshire, including day trips out by coach and short historical walking tours. And where we've been today is just on the edge of Bassetlaw, and if you're interested in Bassetlaw, then you can also get our latest book, People and Places of Bassetlaw, North Nottinghamshire, which is packed full of interesting stories about this fascinating district. And you can get that from Bookworm in Retford, ring them up and they'll bring one round to you even, or the usual retailers. Thank you very much.